Hey guys, so today we're going to go over the first couple pages of your book. This is page 4 of your Measures of Success for String Orchestra, Book 1 for your instrument. Right now, this is going to be for everybody here, and then we'll have a lot of videos that will be just for your specific instrument. But for right now, we're going to look at 1.1 Beatbox 1. And 1.1 Beatbox 1, you have 4 letters, D, 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 D. Actually, just one letter. We call that a pitch. But we have 4 of them with the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 underneath. Now, we also have a vertical line next to those 4 Ds. And then we have 4 little hash marks that are between the first little section where the 4 Ds are and its next little section with another set of 4 Ds. And I have another vertical line separating those and another 4 hashes. So what we have here are a melody and a rhythm. And what we're going to do now is kind of go over how this all plays out for us to perform. So we have 4 Ds, a vertical bar line called bar line, and that makes it one measure. So one measure is just a sound of 4 Ds. The next measure is another set of 2 bar lines. Well, the first one was the one from the 4 Ds, and the next one's at the end of the measure where we have nothing but rests. And that's why we see them kind of grayed out in your music and the word rest in parentheses. We're going to be quiet during that measure. The next measure, we would call this the third measure, we're going to play another or sing another set of Ds. Then we have another vertical line, bar line, another set of 4 rests, and then a final bar line, or just another bar line. So we have how many bars of measure, or how many measures of music? We have 4 measures of music. 1 for Ds, 1 for rest, 1 for Ds, and 1 for rest. And each little measure has how many beats? 4. They have 4 beats each, hence why you see a number 1, 2, 3, 4 under each of those notes or hashes. Okay, so how do we perform this? Well, we'll need to make sure that we have a metronome at hand before we actually begin. I have here the TM50 chord combo tuner metronome. Now, they don't make these anymore, or at least they're not really available now because they upgraded to the TM60. A little bit similar design, a little bit different, but it still works exactly the same. So there's a tuner side and then there's a metronome side. We're going to use the metronome side. To do so, we're going to turn it on by pressing the metronome on. You'll see that it's already set at a specific tempo. It hasn't started beeping or making any movements yet. And you'll notice that mine has a backlight to it. Yours has a backlight too if you have one. To turn on that backlight, you simply go to this button at the bottom to change the backlight settings. You might have some other settings put in place. For example, there's a beat and a tempo. That tempo for mine says 90 and the beat says 0. We can leave it at that because we're not going to be worried about counting just yet. We're just going to be worried about, or I just want to have a continuous pulse rather than where we are in the measure. But you can use this to your advantage, and we'll talk about that in a second. To change the tempo, we're going to hold down the tempo button or press it a couple of times. And if you hold it down, you can actually, if you press it and hold it down, you set it to where it can go 1 beat per minute at a time. And before, if you didn't do that, it would just skip to the most commonly used ones. I want you to calibrate it down or bring it down to 60 beats per minute. Now, 60 beats per minute is literally the second or second hand because there's how many seconds in a minute? There's 60. So when we're playing this, if you have an analog clock or the one that has a little second hand that moves and an hour hand and minute hand, if you hit the start button at the same time as the second hand moves, you'll see it sync up automatically. So we're going to get started now. I'm going to hit the stop button. When I hit it once, you can see and hear that there's a metronome playing. Now you'll see the little digital line going back and forth. That's what the old school metronomes used to look like with the little weight at the bottom. And we have here a little flashing light, and you can hear the metronome. Now if it's too quiet, you can turn it up. Or if it's too loud, you can turn it down. I like to leave it up as loud as possible so I can actually hear it. Or there's a little headphone jack to use your headphones. However, note that I think it's mostly in mono, meaning if you have a pair of headphones, you only hear it out of one ear rather than both ears. But I may be wrong about that. Anyways, so now we have 0 beats put here, but the metronome is on. You only hear one sound or one type of tick. When you have different beats on here, you'll hear different types of ticks. I digress. Let's get started here. So 60 beats per minute, we're looking at 1.1 beat box 1. Now to begin, I always want to count off. So I'm going to give you one full measure count off before we start. You'll hear me say 1, 2, 3, 4 with the metronome to give you a tempo, which is 60 beats per minute. And then we're going to be going right away to the next beat to sing what we have in front of us. Here's an example. I'm going to count you off. 1, 2, 3, 4. D, 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 D. D, 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 D. Okay, I'm going to hit stop real quick. You'll notice that when I sang this, I sang with the click sound, and I counted with the click sound. You want to match those up in this particular case because we're going to start working on what are called quarter notes. If you've watched the rhythm video, you understand what quarter notes mean in our case. On the rest, we're supposed to stay quiet. If you heard me whisper, that's because I want to know that you know we're still counting. The music hasn't stopped on a rest. It's just you stopped producing sound. Maybe someone else in the orchestra or band is playing, but you're not supposed to be playing during that time, or singing in our case. Let's hit start, and I'll count you off. 1, 2, 3, 4. D, 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 D. D, 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 D. Awesome. Now, something that you've probably already done because your music teacher told you back in 4th grade or in 5th grade like me or Mrs. Bryan or Mrs. Newsom, that you should be tapping your toe. To tap your toe, you're going to keep your heel on the ground and then lift your toe up and down. Every time your toe makes contact with the ground, that's the pulse that you're giving yourself. So if I have the metronome here again, turn it back on, your toe should be moving up and down like this. You don't have to do it with both feet. Just choose one foot to do it with. I would recommend the left foot, but if you're more comfortable with the right, that's fine. For basses, if you're sitting in a stool, use your right foot, obviously, because your left foot is on the stool, or it should be. Let's look at beatbox 1.2. Now, we've changed the pitch. Can you guess what we're playing now? That's right, A. All right, so we played earlier or sang earlier D. Now we're going to sing A. Is the rhythm the same? Well, what do I mean by that? Well, look at how the order of the notes, or letters in this case, are set between the measures. Are they the same amount of time or same amount of beats per measure? Do we have the same amount of measures? And do we have the same amount of rests? And is everything put in the same order as 1.1? Yes, we're just playing a different pitch. Okay, so let's get back to our metronome. I'm going to count you off 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to sing 1.2 together. 1, 2, 3, 4. A, 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 A. A, 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 A. And then we're done. Sorry if I look like I started laughing. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at myself. I can't sing very well. So every time I hear myself out loud singing, I kind of just start giggling. So it's kind of hard for me to keep a straight face. Okay, so you get the idea, right? Let's move on to 1.3. So in 1.3, double trouble, are we playing the same notes or rhythm as 1.1 or 1.2? Well, no, right? Because we are playing D's and we're playing A's. Now, there's also another thing to notice about this. How many beats per measure do we have now? We have 3 beats per measure. 1, 2, 3. A new measure with the new bar line starts. 1, 2, 3. Another measure, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So now we have a different number of beats per measure. And that means we have a different number of sounds to play per measure. So how do we do this? Well, first you got to look at the notes in front of us and find out what are the rests and what are the notes we're playing. Obviously, right? Now, the order or pattern seems pretty repetitive, don't you think? If you look at the very first measure, we have D, D, rest. Measure 2 and measure 3 and measure 4 are pretty much the same rhythmically, meaning you play a note, then you rest on the beats, just like quarter notes or quarter rests. However, the melody is different because we have D, D, rest, A, rest, A, rest, D, D, rest. Notice that when I sang that, I never left any space in between because even though there's not a fourth beat there, that's not for us to be quiet. We're just going to continue on. Let's try this together maybe. Start your metronome at 60 beats per minute, and I'll count you off. Now, one measure is only 1, 2, 3, so pay attention. 1, 2, 3. D, D, A, A, D, D. Okay, let's try it again. This time I'm going to give you the counts with my fingers to show you where we are. 1, 2, 3. D, D, A, D, D, and we're done. Sorry, I can't help myself. I sound terrible when I sing, in my opinion. All right, so that's how you read our music. You've already started to read, you already started to play, now you're performing it. Now we got to try it with our instrument and what that looks like and sounds like.